With me today on the Man in the Arena, this is David Pitman. He is the director of tour planning with Cirque du Soleil, an organization that we have all heard of and seen their shows, either live or on TV, on YouTube. They're all over the place, all over the world. And he has also worked with all of Feld Entertainment's entities, who we have also heard of: Monster Jam, the Circus, Disney on Ice, and plenty more. So, David, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for the invitation. Great to be here.
Absolutely. I wanted to start off with kind of asking you at a high level how you got to be the director of tour planning with Cirque du Soleil. I know that you have informed me of kind of what your steps were, but for the people listening to this, what were your roles prior to being with Cirque du Soleil?
Yeah, well, it's prior to Cirque du Soleil, I was with Feld Entertainment for many years. Uh, Fantastic experience, and really, I always jokingly refer to it as Feld University, because so many people have spent a long time at Feld,
Mm.
like I did, and learned so much about our industry. But just to go a step earlier than that, I mean, when I was a kid, my whole desire in life was to be a drummer. I always wanted to play the drums and everything. So I pursued that all through school, high school, and everything. And when I was getting ready to think about going to college, my dad said to me, "You're going to go to college, right?" And I said, "Oh yeah." And he says, "Well, what do you want to study?" And I said, "Well, I want to keep on playing the drums and study music and everything." And it was in that moment that looking back on it, it occurred to me a couple of years ago. It was in that moment that I really received the best gift that I was ever given, which is my dad just simply said, "Okay," you know, and
That's awesome.
yeah, because a lot of people, a lot of dads, parents would have said, "Well, that's great. Music's a nice thing. You can have a lot of fun with that, but
Right. It's a
why don't you
hobby.
get your yeah, yeah, exactly. Why don't you get your degree in engineering or marketing or something, and then you can play your drums on the side, and everything." But no, he said, "Okay, great, let's do it." And so I wound up going, and I got a bachelor's degree in jazz performance.
Hmm.
Um, and so and the other thing I always talk about is my dad has a doctorate in physics. He worked in the State Department, negotiating deals, negotiating the arms control treaties between the Russians and the U.S. back in the day.
Wow.
And
Big time.
um, yeah, and my sister's a renowned surgeon. My mom is an art historian. She worked as a docent at the Hirshhorn Museum, and I'm the jazz drummer of the family. So, uh, but at any rate, the great thing about that, as I call it, a gift, is that what he allowed me to do in that moment was to pursue my passion, and everything else beyond that was really up to me. And so even as a musician, I mean, I worked hard at it, and really, I pursued it. And but if you'd said to me, when I was playing drums in bars, 6 nights a week and everything, if you told me that you're going to be negotiating the deals and planning the tours for Disney on Ice and for Ringling Brothers and for Cirque du Soleil, and I would have said, first of all, you're crazy, and second of all, I'm not interested in that. I just want to be the drummer.
Right.
But at any rate, I so I after I played in bands for a couple of years and everything, I had an opportunity to join Disney on Ice. And way back in the day, we used to have a small orchestra that toured with the show. We picked up some local musicians in every city, and we put on headphones and played along to a click track, with the rest of the orchestra and everything. So I did that for a couple of years, touring around North America. And then uh, first time ever, we Disney on Ice was going to go to Japan, and I said, "Hey, I'll go," and because that was really one of my ambitions as a kid. I wanted to play the drums, and that. I wanted music to be my ticket to travel around the world and experience different cultures and see the world.
Yeah,
Um,
if you had told a younger you at the time, "Hey, you're going to be fresh out of college playing drums on a world tour," you'd have been pretty ecstatic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the goal, you know.
Hmm.
And so, you know, I wound up sort of hitting that, and so but when we went over to Japan, we didn't take any musicians. They put everything on tape. So I went as a sound man, you know, because it was one of my other interests and everything. It's something I dabbled in. So toured Japan for about 5 months. Then we went into I don't know, Taiwan and Malaysia, Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii. Then and then it just continued. And for 5 years, I was touring almost exclusively outside of the U.S.
Wow.
and traveling all over the world. Did a couple of rotations around Europe, South America, then came back to North America and toured around North America for many years with Disney on Ice. And eventually that led to an opportunity. And through the course of that, I was a sound man, I was a stage manager, and eventually a company manager and a tour accountant on tour. So I learned a lot of things. I learned, you know, a lot about managing people,
Definitely.
and also about the you know, about the economics of touring, the touring business, and the settlement processes and things like that. Um, so eventually that led to an opportunity to start doing the international booking for Disney on Ice. So I did that for about 5 years. I lived in Amsterdam for a while. Then I came back to the corporate headquarters of Feld, which is was based here in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. Was based there for many years. Worked out of the main office there, and then I started doing domestic booking as well. And then in 2010, as you know, as the saying goes, you know, sometimes, you know, a kid wants to run away from home and join the circus. Well, in 2010, I ran away from the circus and I joined Cirque du Soleil. So and you know, so it's just, you know, been an incredible opportunity. The interesting thing, you know, when I was at Feld, I was either working on international booking or domestic booking as part of the domestic booking team. But at Cirque, you know, it's the whole world, the globe. So uh, it's been really nice to be able to, you know, have a holistic view on touring around the world.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's
Yeah.
cool to see, especially from a young person who maybe is trying to get into the industry. It's cool to see your perspective of going in as a percussionist, and obviously you're not when you're on tour and with the business all day long and for months and years at a time. You're going to see a lot more things than just kind of what you're narrowed into. You're not just going to be playing with the band. You're going to be seeing and learning all about the business and the economics around you, which is kind of what led you to literally create your entire career, where you started as stage manager and sound guy, and then you kind of worked your way up to where you are now by learning key aspects of the business.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I've always viewed it as, you know, sort of opportunities and doors opening for me. And, you know, somebody say opening a door and saying, "Hey, here's an opportunity. Are you interested? Do you want to give this a try?" You know, and so as much as I've, you know, I think I've worked pretty hard and tried to learn a lot. You know, I've also been very fortunate to meet a lot of really great people along the way that have, you know, given me opportunities and placed their trust in me.
That's really cool. And I wanted to ask you about kind of what your life was like on tour, kind of maybe outside of the lens of your actual job, your actual life. How did you balance mental health with physical health when you're traveling all around the world all the time? You don't really have a home. What was your life like? How were you able to exercise? What were you eating and drinking and those types of things?
Um, well, I would say laundromats and you know, and I don't know, TGI Fridays or something. But
Yeah.
it's a very interesting question. You know, a lot of times, as my role sort of shifted, it would be, you know, things would be a lot different. When I was a stage manager, for example, it was the first time Disney on Ice had ever been in any of those countries, in any of those venues, So there was, and it was, before, I mean, this was before, uh, this was back in the days of fax machines, not, not email.
Yes.
We didn't have AutoCAD to lay everything out,
I
So
cannot even imagine, to be completely honest. I cannot imagine what the process was like going into a show without those things.
yeah, it was, it was, in some respects, you could say it was very seat of the pants.
Hmm.
A lot of many times. I mean, I'd show up at a venue for a load in at 7 a.m, never having set foot in the venue before. And
Hmm.
trying to guide my crew of guys plus a local crew that doesn't speak the same language, and figure it all out and have it done in 8 hours and have a show that night. You know, it was pretty challenging. A couple of those tours, I remember being on one of those tours in Europe, and literally in 10 months, looking back on it at the end of the tour and said, I had 4 days off in the last 10 months. you know it was pretty insane. And
Hmm.
the good thing is that I think the industry as a whole has grown up since I know the industry's grown up since those days. you
Hmm.
know and that's a good thing, because a lot of, some of the stuff we did even by today's standards would not be, what you'd consider, well thought out or maybe safe.
Right, right.
uh, people working too hard, too many hours and things like that. So it's good to see that the industry as a whole has really tried to address, some of those things.
Definitely.
um, One of the good things about traveling like I did with what we call family show is that you're usually in a town for at least a week at a time.
Yes.
So you're not moving every day. You have actually you can empty your suitcase out and hang stuff up in the closet in the hotel. And on a let's say on a Thursday when you've got one show in the evening, you would have a little bit of time to get out and see some things in the city, or find a laundromat or whatever it is. But so it was what I would consider a much more humane way of touring
Yes.
than a rock and roll kind of hit and run every night.
That's what I was going to ask you. I actually had that listed down as a question was with the shows that you are with, like Disney on Ice, you are typically in a city for a week at a time and you unpack everything on a Monday and pack everything up on a Sunday. Do you think
Yeah.
looking back on it, do you think you would have had any interest in doing a rock and roll tour that's lasting the same amount of time, but you might be in a different city every other night?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that always, intrigued me, especially coming from, a musical background, and being in the environment of, being around musicians and all that sort of thing. Yeah, it's always intrigued me. I had a lot of guys that I worked with on Disney on Ice. After Disney on Ice, a lot of them moved over to the rock and roll world. And so when they'd come through the DC area, they'd call me up and I'd go hang out with them. And after they'd get done their load in, and sit on the tour bus and catch up and everything. So it's an interesting different different you know part of that lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. Could you explain exactly what being a stage manager for Disney on Ice was like? What were kind of your responsibilities when you arrived to a city, and then during the week while the shows were going on?
Yeah, well, that role for me was, first of all, doing all the advance work for each city. So, either you're in touch with the labor provider, the local stagehand labor provider, or in touch with the local promoter, um, a few weeks in advance of every city, and you're letting them know, what the schedule is going to be, what local labor requirements you have, what equipment needs, whether it's forklifts or cranes to put the containers down on the ground. So you're advancing all the dates, and that's usually while you're in a city, um, where you're performing. So you advance these dates, usually on a Monday. Usually Mondays was a travel day. Sometimes Sunday nights, like domestically, we used to, sometimes we charter a flight and we do a loadout on a Sunday night in one city, take a bus to the airport, get on the plane, fly to the next city, land there at 3, 4 in the morning, bus to the hotel and everything. But usually, sometimes Monday was a bit of a, I would go to the venue and meet up with, the event people from the building, and just walk through everything. And then Tuesday would be a load in. Usually start sometimes 7 in the morning, sometimes earlier, but do the load in on Tuesday, come back and touch things up on Wednesday, have the first performance Wednesday evening. And then through the course of the week, like, I was on the tour of Beauty and the Beast on Ice when that film, that movie first came out. And so it was the hottest show ever. And so every week we had 12 performances.
Wow.
So Wednesday night, and then 3 on Saturday, 2 or 3 on Sunday, and then a loadout. So it was a full a full week. But yeah, so once you get the show kind of running, once you get the premiere out of the way, hopefully then the crew and the staff and the performers and the artists and everything, hopefully then they can keep it running through the course of the week, and then on the remainder of the week, then I'm continuing doing the advance work. And then like I said, Sunday do a couple of shows, and then you load out the show Sunday night and get on a bus and
do it all again.
Yeah, right.
Do it all again the next week.
Yeah.
Did you ever run into any significant issues, maybe that you could not have used foresight to predict? Maybe when you got to a city and started getting set up, maybe the ice wasn't the way that you guys needed it to be, or last minute changes needed to be implemented very quickly. Did you ever run into any issues with things like that?
Yeah, I tend to try and solve them and then put them out of my mind.
Yes.
So
I'm trying to bring them back up.
Yeah, thanks. No, I remember. Actually, it was one time long ago. We were in Zurich, and it was on the loadout actually, and it was the first time Disney on Ice had ever performed in the arena in Zurich, and it had been a particularly challenging week, and so we started doing the loadout, and then the couple of the guys on the crew, they started complaining and said, man, so the ice is all wet. We're slipping all over the place. Our feet are, wet and cold, So I went over to the guy from the venue and the operations manager, and I said, and he didn't speak a lick of English. So I'm trying to communicate to him that, hey, something's wrong. And he's, basically he said, no, nothing's wrong. He said, I turned the compressors off because we have to melt the ice and get it out of here. And
as you guys are you're pushing carts on it, you got ladders on it and all types of things on the ice, trying to get stuff out of the air, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of a nightmare. And
Wow.
it was something that, couldn't be sort of turned around and fixed, at the time. But yeah, there's 1,000 stories like that, where or stuff doesn't work, that you just gotta. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's that old saying, the show must go on.
Yep.
So
definitely.
So that's
have to figure out some sort of solution. Yeah. Moving over to Cirque du Soleil, where you are now, was your first position with Cirque du Soleil in tour planning?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So you probably know that Cirque, we tour with 2 different formats. We have our big top tent shows, and then we have the shows that perform in arenas. So specifically, I plan the tours of the shows that perform in arenas. So my role basically is to plan a profitable tour, right? And then also to negotiate the commercial terms and the contracts with either the venues or the promoters where those shows perform.
Got it. So what would you say when you are, let's circle back to the very start when maybe a tour is first being planned. What are kind of the biggest challenges you face when you're planning start to finish what the whole route is going to be like for an arena tour?
Well, um, first of all, it's our own traffic, right? Because so I have to sort of make way for the big top shows. Um, the big top shows are much more expensive to operate, so they get priority on
Okay.
what cities they get to visit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I would want to, let's say, always my first priority would be to choose the most profitable markets, so I would always want to book my show in Los Angeles and New York and Chicago and Miami,
Yep.
but I have to make way. If the big tops are going to go to those markets, then I have to avoid them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
so
is it
yeah,
avoid that? Is it avoid those cities entirely, or is it if Big Top is there in January, you can maybe book in the following October or something like that?
it depends, but usually over the years we've been able to share markets,
Okay.
you know, with the priority being for the big top shows.
Mm-hmm.
So the first real thing to watch out for me is my traffic from my own shows.
Yeah.
The second thing is availability in venues, and as you'll know, I mean, every NBA and NHL venue in North America, they won't give me 5 consecutive or 6 consecutive days during playoff season.
Yeah.
So I have to figure out where to go during the playoff season, avoiding all of the major venues. Um, and um, and then of course it's also other traffic, and like the way I see it, every venue only has 365 pieces of inventory per year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm asking for maybe 6 or 7 consecutive pieces of inventory. So it's a big part of their inventory, really, when you
Definitely.
think
Yeah.
about it. And then you think about all of the other commitments that they have, that a major arena has, to their sports tenants, to the other Feld shows, Disney on Ice, um, Monster Jam, Marvel Live, all of those other properties. So that's a big challenge, right? Because I part of what I say, in creating a tour, it has to be contiguous and profitable, right? So I can't, just go, oh, I don't have any place to go this week, and I'll just give everybody a week off. You know,
Yeah. Right.
that doesn't work. So the scheduling part of it is a big component. And the other interesting part of it is that Cirque du Soleil's shows are very challenging technically. They're typically big, heavy, and very demanding. Let's say for example, the we have all these artists that are flying. They're on computer controlled electric winches. And they're flying all
Right.
over the place, and they're doing all these aerial acrobatics. And for that reason, there is really very extremely limited flexibility they have as far as the trim heights and everything for
Mm-hmm.
the lighting rigs and the acrobatic rigs and everything. And so if we can't meet the trim height that we need in a certain venue, we can't play there, you
Yeah.
know.
Definitely.
And so, it's an interesting thing, talk about challenges. A lot of times nowadays, the venues are, they're always trying to stay up with the technology and everything. So a lot of venues are putting these big scoreboards, up and everything. And so we'll play, let's say Toyota Center in Houston. A couple of years ago, they put this big,
Yeah.
massive video system up there. And from one year to the next, our guys had all the specifications for the old video score clock. And then we go to do the next show in there a year or two later, and all of the technicians were freaking out. They said, "Oh, they got this massive thing, and we don't know if we can rig the show."
Mm-hmm.
So it's another one of the challenges, and in a lot of cases, I'm I'm in an ideal world, I'm booking a tour 3 years in advance,
Wow.
and in a lot of cases, we don't. The show doesn't exist 3 years in advance.
Right.
You know,
Right. You're just
so
getting
I'm
dates down for what you know,
right.
which is Cirque du Soleil is going to be there for these dates.
Right. And for example, a couple of years ago, we produced our first ever show that featured figure skating. It's called
Mm-hmm.
Crystal. Um, Played Capital One Arena.
Yep.
Um, and so I'm booking that tour, and then 3 years in advance, not knowing the theme of the show, and then they come along and they say, by the way, this is an ice show. So then I had
Changes things a
go
bit.
back, just making sure which venues have ice and which don't. And then as it turns out, for example, Feld with Disney on Ice has several portable tank ice units, so they can install ice on a bare arena floor.
Mm-hmm.
And at Cirque, we didn't have those temporary ice solutions, so it became another challenge for me to book a 2-year tour around North America, only in venues that can provide the ice.
Right.
And so it's always a new curveball.
That's really interesting. Tough to
Yeah.
think about all the things going into it, especially if you have literally no clue what the show is going to be and all of the
Right.
big types of things that you would normally or hope to know, I guess, in a situation where you're booking an entire nationwide tour.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about and this might be out of your realm, but I'm sure you know a lot more about it than I do. But the Cirque du Soleil Vegas residency shows,
Hmm.
how important are those shows to the business of Cirque du Soleil?
Well, I mean, I can only say they're very important.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, you know, it's where so many people, when you talk about Cirque du Soleil, there are a lot of people that think that Las Vegas is the only place that Cirque performs.
Right. Unaware that there's a whole tour.
Right, exactly. But the reality is that Cirque du Soleil was born in a tent,
Mm-hmm.
and toured in tents for 5-6 years before ever setting down shows in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Uh, so, but it's challenging. I mean, at one point, I think we had seven different productions in Las Vegas.
Wow.
You know,
All
so
different
that's
shows at different hotels.
yeah,
Wow.
exactly. But it's a lot of inventory. When you think about
Mm-hmm.
that, it's like doing each one of them doing 2 shows a night and having whatever 2,500 seats. It's a lot of inventory to try and
Mm-hmm.
move to the same brand. But what's interesting about that to me is that it's one of the fascinating things about Cirque du Soleil is you see 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 different Cirque du Soleil shows, and everyone is going to be completely different.
Yeah, you're not going to get bored by any means if you go from one to the next.
Right. And sometimes I think, that might work a little bit as a disadvantage because, somebody goes and sees a show like Ka in Las Vegas and they think, oh, that was great. I want to go see, another one, the next one. And they go with an expectation of, something as similar or even bigger than Ka.
Right.
And then they see something else and they're like, well, that was different,
Mm-hmm.
but it is one of the very, very special and unique things about Cirque du Soleil is that it's such a creative organization,
Mm-hmm.
and so every time you're going to see something that is going to amaze you, but in a way that you probably didn't expect.
Right. It's almost like a movie with a director, the director being Cirque du Soleil, and you see that director's movie and you absolutely love it. And you go say, I'm going to watch all this director's movies. And obviously the
Yeah,
next movie that you watch is completely different. It's probably still amazing, but it's completely different. So it's interesting how when you think Cirque du Soleil, you think amazing acrobatics, and you might not think of what the actual show is, like what the theme of the show is, or what's specifically happening in the show. So it's interesting
Mhm.
to think about the differences when you go from one to the next,
Yeah,
especially in the same city.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Have you been to any of the Vegas residency shows, and how do you think it compares, with your expert opinion and sound and atmosphere and all of that, to an arena or a big top show?
I've been to most of the shows in Vegas. I have not yet, sadly, I have not seen O yet, which is
Mm,
probably one of the most famous shows, and I'm eager to see it. It's just every time I've gotten to Vegas, either they've had a dark night or something like that. So one of these
Where
days
does O play?
at the Bellagio.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. Um, but at any rate, so I've seen most of the shows, and like for example, the Beatles Love show is great. I mean, I was a big Beatles fan, growing up and everything. Um, and it's fascinating to see the artistic interpretation
Hmm.
of something that was sort of in one medium, more or less. The A lot of the Beatles music being brought to life really on stage. It's
Yeah.
it's fascinating. Um, as far as differences, the obviously when you can do a show that doesn't have to travel, it takes a lot of limitations off of it,
Definitely, yeah.
um, because anytime it has to travel, it has to be able to fit in a truck and in an airplane and things like that, and it has to be able to break down in 4 hours and everything like that.
Mhm.
So touring does create a certain level of limitation. I know that for Ka, for example, the theater where Ka is presented, um, they did incredible things. They had to raise the fly grid in order to be able to, fit all the aerial acrobatic equipment in there,
Mhm.
and they also had to dig down deeper
Oh, wow.
where the stage is located because of all the machinery and the hydraulic equipment that moves this gigantic stage around. And they dug so deep that they hit the water table in Las Vegas, and so it wound up
That's
having
amazing.
to, yeah, and they wound up having to actually um, waterproof this
Yeah.
pit below the stage, which was not expected. So um, but the interesting, so in a big top show, um, the interesting thing about a big top show is we still create the environment, right? Because it's still our tent,
Mhm.
and so we have the possibility of creating and controlling every element of the customer experience, you know uh, even in the front of house and everything. So that's a bit different than a show being presented in an arena, because
Mhm.
obviously an arena is a very, very multi-purpose venue, and
Yes.
one night there's a Wizards game, and then the next night there's a Capitals game, and the next night it's a concert, and then the next night it's Cirque du Soleil. So we can't control as much of the environment in an arena setting. And it's interesting though, because like with the Big Top show, if you've ever been to one of our Big Top shows
Mm-mm,
in
I've
the
not.
tent, yeah, what's really cool about the customer experience for a Big Top show is that their experience actually starts before they even get out of the car, because when you're driving up to a Big Top show, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look around, and you're going to see the tent, and it's beautiful, and it's
Mhm.
it's really a sight to behold, and the excitement starts at that point,
That's really
you
cool.
know
Mhm.
yeah. um and so then you get out of it, you park the car, and you go up and you go in, and then start controls the environment, and so we're really able to make it a first class kind of experience from for a longer period of time,
Mhm.
you know um and whereas in an arena, you're going into an environment, and when let's say you go you get your ticket taken and you're in on the concourse. It's a good environment, but it's not Cirque du Soleil,
Right, right. Feels like any other
uh,
event at the arena. You might see a different merchandise stand, but the arena as a whole is still just Capital One
yeah.
Arena or wherever you are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're going to see advertisements for
Hmm.
whatever, the other shows coming up and all that sort of thing. So they're very different experiences really between the resident shows and the big top shows and the arena shows. But the show itself, the performance and the artistry and the creativity and everything, they're all, in my opinion, they're all on par.
Hmm. That's amazing. Um, One question that I definitely wanted to ask you was through all of your time and all of the venues that you've been to as a part of Feld and with Cirque du Soleil now, which venue would you say, if you could only pick one, stands out the most in terms of atmosphere when you were there and feel and just overall greatness?
Wow. You'll get me in trouble now. Um,
I guess, yeah. If you can't answer, that's perfectly fine, but maybe
well,
pick a top
but
few.
but I mean, what I will say to you on that, I mean, there's a lot of great venues
Hmm.
around the world. I mean, Capital One Arena being in the top of the list. Um, but one of the things that I talk about a lot is the fact that you know the the customer experiences in arenas has improved so much in the recent history of of events. And so nowadays, like if I go to a show, when I go to a show at Capital One Arena, you know I I'm telling you the honest truth. I walk in and there's a concierge there and they greet me
Hmm.
and they say, "Hi, can I help you?" And they got a smile on their face. And I'm like, this is great. And they look at my ticket and they say, "Yeah, if you just want to go over there, is there anything else you need help with?" And I always say, you know, that venue managers, arena managers should run the airlines, right? Because I mean, contrast it. You go to an event at an arena, and
Hmm.
like I was just describing you, I mean, there's somebody there, they're in a nice, clean uniform, they got a smile on their face, and they're treating me like a guest. And they're saying,
We
"How
hope
can I
so, at
help you?"
least. Hmm.
Yeah, no, but they I mean, I've not had a bad experience
That's
in an
good.
arena,
Mm.
front of house. I've not had a bad experience in an arena in years, in
Mhm.
decades. Um, and not to bash airlines, and they're all different, of course, but think about that. I mean, if you could have that, if you could feel the same way when you got on a plane, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, it would.
you know,
That's very true.
so that's all. That's my contrast, I guess. But
Definitely.
there are a lot of great arenas, and
Mhm.
even these days, like the architects, as they create these new arenas and everything, every time they're building a better experience, right?
Mhm.
Better dining experience,
Yeah.
better just better experience in general. I mean, I can remember being on tour and going to some of these really really old municipally owned arenas that are just literally concrete and cinder block and not even a dash of paint,
Mhm.
and they're just damp and musty and you know and nowadays you go to an arena, newly designed arena, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I was at the well, what's it called today, the Amway Center in Orlando.
Yes.
And they have like it's a VIP section, but then it's got a door and you can go out and there's a patio and it's outdoors, and you can overlook the downtown Orlando. It's just great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know the Magic and the Amway Center are very much well known for their guest service, customer
Mhm.
service type of work. I've never been myself, but I've heard that fans absolutely love it there, and they have a lot of great activations and lounges and things like that for fans to enjoy.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I wanted to also ask you, since you weren't able to directly answer the venue question, which I totally appreciate, no worries at all, completely makes sense. What is your favorite event that you've been to outside of the Feld events and Cirque du Soleil? Maybe a sporting event. What was kind of the most impactful event that you've been to?
A lot of them. I've been to a couple of concerts at Capital One that were fantastic. I remember seeing Stevie Wonder several years back.
Oh, very cool.
Um, and what was amazing about that show was, I mean, he had the audience in the palm of his hand the entire night, and he would sit down and play a song, and the crowd's up and on their feet dancing, and he was having such a great time. And then he would, at the end of a song, he would stop and he would grab his microphone and maybe stand up, and he'd start telling a story. And it was amazing. You'd see 17,000 people sit down and you could hear a pin drop, you know.
That's really cool.
Um, yeah. So, I saw the Police at Capital One.
Hmm.
Who else did I see there not too long ago? Roger Waters, The Wall
Oh yeah.
tour.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, some really great shows. What else have I seen? I got to go to long ago. I got to go to a World Series game, which was quite quite
That's awesome.
exciting.
I
Yeah,
was able to go to one of the World Series games this past year in Washington. Unfortunately,
yeah,
I was rooting for the Nationals, and it was game 5. So it was the last World Series game there. They obviously lost because
yeah,
each game in the World Series, every team lost the home game. So that was kind of a bummer. But the atmosphere was insane, and it was very, very cool. It's definitely a bucket list item.
yeah. Nats Park is another beautiful venue.
Hmm.
It's not obviously a stadium, but yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. The architects are have to get a lot of credit,
Yes.
to for just really enhancing the customer experience.
And it seems like teams and stadiums are investing more and more money these days for fan experience, which is great.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I have one more question for you, and it's a bit of a fun question, and it's very open ended. Do you have any fun facts or fun stories that you can share that fans may not have heard of, or people who are interested in Cirque and Feld shows may not know about?
Wow, that's a challenge. Um, my experience at Cirque is primarily behind the scenes.
Mm,
So I don't have a lot of on the road on tour experience to relay those kind of stories.
right.
I will say though that so Cirque's main headquarters is in Montreal, and I'm very fortunate. I work from my home here in Northern Virginia, and then before the pandemic and the borders are closed, I would typically spend about a week or even 2 weeks sometimes in Montreal at the head office, about every 6 weeks.
Hmm.
So it's the thing about their headquarters there is that it's all in one place. You've got all of the behind the scenes people, all the attorneys and the production, the creative people, um, tour planning people like myself, you know, all based there. But also we have a whole rehearsal facility there, training, gymnasium for the artists. Um, and even across the street, there's what we call the artist residence, where
Oh
there are
wow.
about 130 rooms. It's pretty basic. It's more like your college dormitory. Nothing can burn. All the furniture is bolted down. But so when there are new shows being produced, the artists stay there in the residence, and then they just walk across the street every day to do the training and rehearsals and
That's
and
really
uh,
cool.
cre- creating the show. Yeah. Um, I would say, when I was at Feld, I didn't spend a lot of time around the circus, but those were some of the most memorable times when I was around the circus, because you'd see the interaction between the people and the animals, and it was really something to behold. Especially the elephants. They're such uh, just fantastic creatures, and they're
Hmm.
so playful. You know, one time I was in St. Petersburg, and it was during a performance, and I was standing just outside of the load-in door. And I was having a cup of coffee, and the elephants were coming out of the arena, and the last elephant to come out of the arena just kind of stopped for a second. And the next thing I know, this trunk came over my shoulder and like just swallowed up all my coffee. It was right out of my cup. It was the most amazing thing.
That's
So,
amazing.
you know, yeah, it's just funny things like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, but yeah, the Cirque du Soleil, uh, especially the facility up in Montreal, it's really something fantastic, and even to the extent that they have a cafeteria there, and every day, you know, they have a whole team of cooks that come in, and they cook up lunch and everything. But even around the facility, there's these gardens, and in the summertime, you know, you'd be walking in there, and first time I recognized this, you know, one day there was all these eggplants growing, and then the next day they weren't there, and then for the full week, you know, it was everything on the menu with lunch was eggplant something, you know.
Huh. That's really cool.
So yeah, it's really a unique experience,
Mm-hmm.
and very enjoyable. I can't wait till all of this
Yes, agreed.
pandemic is over, and get a chance to get back up to Montreal.
Agreed. The
Yeah.
guest that I had on right before you, actually this past week, was Jonathan Lee Iverson
Oh
with the
yeah.
circus. He was amazing. He had an elephant story as well, so I'm glad you could also share one. His was very similar. He was walking down in the hallway, and every single time he passed this one elephant, the elephant would do the same thing. It would just slobber all over his face, pretty much, just whack him with his trunk. He was really fun to have on.
Yeah, yeah, but that's the thing. The elephants are just the most intelligent and playful creatures.
Mhm.
And you know, so it's pretty amazing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, David. This was really great. I greatly appreciate you coming on. Um,
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
absolutely. Thank you again, and have a great day. This has been The Man in the Arena with David Pitman.